Hello and welcome, I'm Marina Kim with the latest news from Kazakhstan. Workers of the enterprise Emba in Atyrau threaten an impending strike as over 1,500 people are ready to suspend work until Kinzhibek Ibrashev, the CEO of the parent company Exploration and Production Kazmunaygas, will personally pay the workers a visit.
Oilfield workers of the Emba, a branch of the Kazmunaygas, are ready to enter a strike, demanding the management to forego the new procedure of wages calculation. People complain about the recent increase accounting to only 30 cents. At the same time, the workers have been deprived of the ecological bonuses equal to approximately 70% of the base salary, as well as the branch coefficient, which adds almost 50% to the wages. Said tariffs were approved back in 2009 by the country's prime minister.
This is a payment sheet given to the staff, clearly. It is very small, the size of 2 matchboxes. In the past, the payment sheet was much bigger. There's no point in the transparency of Kazmunaygas if they allow such disputes.
Workers have no intention to meet with the management of Emba, considering Kazmunaygas is the strategic decision maker. However, Astana ignores the demands of Atyrau workers, saying that all complaints in written form should be submitted by the chairman of the trade union.
Max Bakayev issued a statement today, and based on that, we will make a decision.
This is not the first case of the labor conflict in the oil industry this year. In March, workers of Uzyenmonaygas organized a 2-week strike, also demanding the fair wage increase. An attempt to ignore the strike led to enormous losses. In order to avoid the same situation, the Profile Ministry promised to work on the issue.
The management of the company began working on the questions of keeping the 70% coefficient payment and introduction the 1.8% inter-branch benefit long before receiving this letter, and the resolution of the issue is almost ready.
Workers declare that if the management will ignore the talks, the entire staff, which is more than 1,500 people, will enter a stay-in strike starting July 2nd. Furthermore, the action's participants are ready for a hunger strike.
Kazakhstan, being the OSCE chair, remains very diplomatic about the recent incident in the Mediterranean Sea. On June 1st, Israeli troops stormed a flotilla carrying humanitarian supplies headed to the Gaza Strip. 19 people died, mostly Turkish citizens. The official Ankara reacted by calling off its diplomatic mission from Tel Aviv, while a number of EU states sharply criticized the Israeli authorities.
Казахстан с глубоким прискорбием воспринял сообщение об инциденте, произошедшем на Средиземном море.
It is with deep sorrow that Kazakhstan learned the news of the incident in the Mediterranean Sea near the Gaza Strip. We express our condolences to the families of dead and wounded. Kazakhstan encourages immediate and comprehensive investigation of the incident and calls upon all parties concerned to exercise restraint. I do not completely agree that it is a streamlined position, since every state is building relationships with one another. It remains to be seen what actually happened, while I believe that our position on the matter is more than clear.
When silence speaks louder than words, the democratic community of Kazakhstan has summed up the preliminary results of the country's OSCE chairmanship. Unfortunately, the head of the OSCE Center in Astana, Alexander Kilchevsky, refused listening to the uncomforting conclusions, but still had to observe the silent protest.
European promises and Asian lies. This epigram is the result of the 5-month-long chairmanship of Kazakhstan in the OSCE. The roundtable with representatives of civil society and opposition was held in Almaty on Tuesday. After a 4-hour-long debate, the sides have agreed that the OSCE for Kazakhstan is a global mirage of an image. The rest of the countries where the democracy is not developed and which do not follow the democratic principles have no right to represent arbitration in conflicts and disputes between other states. The official OSCE representatives have ignored the meeting. The head of the OSCE Center in Astana, Alexander Kilchevsky, was sent an official invitation, but he was busy attending the opening ceremony of the National Conference on the implementation of transparency initiatives in mining industry. During his speech, representatives of environmental NGOs of Atyrau have observed a minute's silence. This is the way environment specialists expressed their protest against the inaction of Consultative Council of the Orhus Center, which was created last December to regulate the environmental issues. The ambassador has accepted the declaratory nature of the action.
The center was created recently, just 6 months ago, and was dealing with internal issues. Problems do exist, and we hope to resolve them in the nearest future, namely by the end of this year.
The silent action was ignored, but when ecologist Tokjan Kizatova decided to voice the complaint to Kilchevsky, her microphone was turned off. It seemed that this action was the best illustration of what the oppositionists call the transition to the Asian vector of democracy.
The current chair of the OSCE continues to appear in the annual reports of Amnesty International. The authorities do not fulfill their verified obligations, while tortures are still being used to obtain testimonies accepted by the country's courts.
The head of Russian branch of Amnesty International, Sergei Nikitin, noted that human rights activists have a lot to share, as the organization's annual report totaled to more than 500 pages. In particular, Kazakhstan was expected to make certain steps to improve the situation, but returned only empty promises. Nazarbayev approved the National Actions Plan for Human Rights until 2012. However, prisoners and their families continued to complain about tortures and block access to attorneys.
Кроме того, Национальный комитет безопасности, как это, в общем,
People complain that they are detained for a long time before they are granted access to attorneys. Furthermore, the National Security Service uses the excuse of combating terrorism to make arrests and commit unlawful acts against citizens.
Совершать какие-то противоправные действия в отношении граждан.
According to the report, tortures were used to obtain testimonies of Dmitry Tyan and Oleg Yevloyev, later sentenced to 25 years of imprisonment. Accountant Inessa Karhu, accused in fraud, lost her sight while in jail. Experts state that legal procedure and detention conditions in Kazakhstan do not correspond to international standards.
Казахстан очень нервно реагирует на обвинения.
Kazakhstan reacts very nervously to the accusations that tortures are still being used in the country. The reaction of the authorities in this regard is far from constructive. We see no signs so far that the state acknowledges the problem and is going to take some actions to change the situation.
Признает эту проблему и собирается как-то изменить.
The report described in detail a model process against Evgeny Zhovtis. The human rights activist was not even warned that he was questioned as a suspect and not a witness. This opened the door to a whole wave of other procedural violations. Due to the large number of unjustly convicted people, Kazakhstan became an object of a separate study by the Amnesty International, published in addition to the annual report.
Even those considered to be a part of the system admit being defenseless against it. 3 officers of the National Security Agency were sentenced to 7 years of minimum security prison for kidnapping. Now the accused are being defended by both attorneys and even their parents.
Children protection is a parental duty. Fathers of former employees of Almaty's Department of National Security Agency, Farhadjan Yunusbayev, Ruslan Jitizbayev and Askar Rustambekov, asked journalists to stand up for honor and dignity of their sons.
On May 21st, the court sentenced our children to 7 years of minimum security prison and arrested them in the courtroom. This was the last drop for us.
In July of 2009, state security agents kidnapped businessman Zainuddin Magomedov with no intent to pass him to Shamil Murtazaliyev, the advisor of the Kyrgyzstan's president. According to Magomedov, on July 19, 2009, he was taking off the flight Almaty-Dushanbe and brought to Kyrgyzstan in the trunk of a car. Kidnappers turned out to be Yunusbayev, Jitizbayev and Rustambekov. On September 23rd, all 3 were arrested and later sentenced to 2 years of probation. The prosecutor's office appealed the decision.
Thousands of law enforcement agents follow this case because their further work, fate and also national security depend on the outcome of the process.
Parents of the national security employees are confident that their children are innocent, and the investigation was conducted with numerous violations. They stated Magomedov has changed his testimony several times. According to their data, the kidnapped businessman simply made the first move to avoid his punishment. Attorneys were especially outraged by publications in the newspaper Vremya.
As attorney, I think that if one conducts a journalistic investigation, there should be some proof of what had happened, but nothing what was written took place.
Representatives of both military court and security agency avoid giving comments on the issue. In their turn, officers' parents prepare an appeal to the authorities, while attorneys writing one of their own.